Lunch and dinner in the 21st century don't exactly look like the Jetsons' meal in a pill or something from a Star Trek replicator, but they're often harried, functional affairs. It hasn't always been thus, and so for a look at meals past and present, we welcome Shauna Linson. She is registered dietitian and program leader at the Wellspring Cancer Support Network. Dylan Gordon, PhD candidate at the University of Toronto and resident anthropologist at Idea Couture. And these familiar food maven faces, there's Jamie Kennedy from Jamie Kennedy Kitchens and Joshna Maharaj, chef and food activist. Good to have everybody around our table.
Hello.
I'm starting with you.
Okay.
How has lunch evolved over the last half century?
Lunch has really, this is my opinion and sort of my experience of witnessing it, lunch has really devolved, right? It once was a pretty big affair. In the middle of the day, it would be a big affair to have quite a big meal.
Even in North America?
Yeah, and you would pause what you were doing to focus on your eating, whereas unfortunately lunch now is just like something edible that gets shoved in your mouth in front of a screen and you get back to work as quickly as possible, or you're in a car, or you're on the way to something else that you're unfortunately prioritizing over your meals, right?
Brown bag, those are the words.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
It's just to fill the tank in the middle of the day.
Fuel. Dylan, you share that view?
Yeah, I think so. And I mean, even beyond that, I don't know how much we even have meals, some people anymore.
Right,
you know, you snack all day, you graze all day. And so I'd say definitely lunch is something that's often, you know, it's turned into a snack, which incidentally is kind of how it started before it was a big meal.
It's
so
true,
it's sort of
it's
gone
true.
back and forth on.
I asked Joshna whether this was, North American as well, because I mean, I think it's still accurate to say in Western Europe anyway, lunch is still, well, it can be a 2 or 3 hour ordeal, can't it?
It's a big deal. Yeah. And in my profession, and Joshna, you must share this too, it's kind of tradition to sit down as a crew around a table. Chef would sit at the head of the table. And everybody's flanking the chef, and the different departments provide different food, but it is an actual pause, sit down meal. And we dine, and we exchange ideas, maybe some instruction. And that's always something I've tried to do in my own restaurants over the years with varying success, Steve. Doesn't always work.
It's clearly something more than just fuel at that point, right? This is a cultural phenomenon at that point.
Yes, and it's just emulating what we're trying to do with our work for the public who come to dine at our restaurants.
Gotcha. Shauna, from the perspective of now let's get this straight on what I'm going to call you here. You say you're a registered dietitian, which is different from a nutritionist?
Exactly.
How so?
A registered dietitian has a 4 to 5 year nutrition degree, which is science-based, and then they go on to do a year graduate nutrition internship, typically through a hospital setting or some sort of community setting.
So you get a lot of education on this.
A lot of education, and it's regulated. You then have to go through, be a member of the College of Registered Dietitians.
Okay, I get it. You're educated.
Exactly.
Good.
So
okay.
nutritionist, anyone can call themselves it.
In which case, from your standpoint as a registered dietitian, do you care how people get their healthy calories as long as they get them?
Well, interestingly enough, I agree with Joshna in terms of we're backtracking. Instead of going forward, some people are skipping lunch. Lunch it's in the middle of the day. We need our nutrients. We need our protein, our fiber, our complex carbohydrates. If we're choosing lunch on the run and we're not planning ahead, we may choose something that's not nutritionally sound. It's not going to keep us through the day. And if we skip lunch and we go more than, let's say, 4 or 5 hours without eating, our blood sugar is going to drop and we're not going to be able to perform well at our job, at taking care of our kids, etc.
Which takes me over here. Is it problematic in your view that dinner has become the meal in North America, to the extent that there is one where people will actually take more time and eat more and turn it into what, the Europeans would call lunch?
It is. I think it's a problem just from what's happening in your body, right? Because to take in that much food at the end of the day when you're just going to go to sleep is you're not doing your body any favors, right? Because your body is spending too much time breaking down the food you ate and not spending time resting and restoring you overnight, which is what your body's job really is while you're sleeping. So it is a problem because it's not a very healthy pattern. Right? It makes you get it that you're going to wait till the end of the day, and people do this weird saving up so that they can splurge and have this giant meal at the end of the day when you're not doing anybody but your taste buds. a service, I
It
think.
feels, though, going back to culture, it feels in a way, though, as if North Americans are rewarding themselves for putting in a tough day at the office,
That's
you
a
know,
great
by
way to put
having
it.
the big meal at the end of the day, even if it isn't the healthiest way to go. Is that right?
I still think it's cultural. It depends where. It's geographical. I think in rural areas, people still adhere to the big meal at noon. In fact, you know, with my neighbors in Hillier, where my farm is, they often talk about going home for dinner, and they call dinner lunch. Lunch is dinner. And then later on in the day, oh yeah, I'm going to get some supper. And so when you look at the word supper, it's closer to the French word souper, which again is that same model where it's big meal, middle of the day, smaller meal at the end of the day, souper, maybe a little bit of soup, some bread, something calming before sleep.
But not a 2-hour extravaganza.
Not a 2-hour extravaganza.
I want to revisit something you said a few minutes back, which was, I think we were talking about the fact that lunch is now, certainly in Western Europe, the big meal of the day. But you said it used to be a snack, and now it's. Fill in the blanks there again. What was that a reference to?
At first, the word before we had the word lunch, there was this word that has a few different forms, but one of them is nunchin. And that was
what is it?
Nunchin, N-U-N-C-H-E-O-N. So that referred to kind of like a snack you could hold in your hand. So it's sort of like today's portable lunch in some ways. But that was, you know, kind of a drink with maybe a snack you'd have in the midday between that big dinner and the supper that you had later that evening. And then over time, maybe in the late 18th century, it sort of starts to become a little more of a fixed meal. And then after the Industrial Revolution, it sort of gets in the groove that we're in today, where we have breakfast, we have lunch, we have dinner. The rhythm of those is sort of aligned with the rhythm of our work. Right. And incidentally, with the dinner thing, I mean, I think the reason a lot of us have a big dinner is because we're not working together with our families. Like if you're a farm family, you're going to see your family, you're going to be spending time with them, and you kind of bond over your work. If you know you're working in a factory, or you're working in an office, and your kids are going to school, when do you really bond with them? Well, you bond with them over dinner
Potentially
at the end
over
of the
dinner,
day,
yeah.
and that's where we get that. I think that big meal from.
But in terms of the size of the meal, everything old is new again.
That's right.
Lunch is fast, as it once was before the Industrial Revolution. Okay,
right.
good. Didn't know that. Shauna, start us off on this. There are a bunch of reasons why people lunch the way they do. Let me make a bit of the list here. Nutrition, social well-being, fuel, comfort. You want to rank these things as to what you think are the most important?
Well, I'm a bit biased, but I'll say nutrition is number one. And number two would be social aspect, obviously. You want to relax while you're eating. I find that I see a lot of clients with gastrointestinal problems because they're eating too quickly. And I'm very into the mindfulness aspect of eating. You want to stop, you want to sit down, you want to enjoy. And lunch is a good time to do that because at the end of the day, you're typically exhausted, your guard is down, your serotonin level, your happy hormones down, and you may tend to overeat. And that's why I see a lot of people eating late into the night and they're snacking on the wrong things to raise their serotonin level, which is their happy hormone.
So nutrition number one for you. As you rank those priorities, how would you do it?
I would think, I share that, right? I share that because good food has fuel, right? To keep us going. And the point of eating is to keep us alive and to keep us nourished. I would definitely say that a pause and connection with other people. Don't do it by yourself, right? That's the one thing. The idea of us sitting in front of a screen and just eating, even if it's the best food, you're losing something by not having a human connection.
So the culinary experience is where you're
the
at.
conviviality of the table is what we call it, is really, that feels like it should be a little higher on everybody's list.
Dylan, how about you?
Well, for me personally, I like tasty food, but I think I would say that I think nutrition is important, but in general, the social aspects of eating, there are so many of them. I think they're really key to us thinking about who we are, and I would even put nutrition as part of our social life. You know, being someone who takes good care of your body, an important value here in North America, not necessarily thought of the same way around the world. So there's so much social density in food and how we think about it. Even the idea of 3 meals a day, very culturally specific to some degree. So I think that's probably, from my perspective, the most important.
Jamie, it is beyond obvious to say that if you go on social media nowadays, people are sharing the culinary experience of whatever's on their plate in a way that they never have before. Social media lets you do that. So how do you rank all of those different attributes for the meal?
Well, I don't like to use my camera when I'm dining. I mean, it's not a fork or a knife. And I echo what you're saying, Josh, about the social interaction around dining. I think that there's so much more enjoyment of food when it's a shared experience, for the most part. When I'm cooking professionally, speaking nutritionally, I always think about the food groups, and how they're combined, and I think about the entire amount of food that I'm cooking. If I'm presenting a menu of 5 courses, for example, I will adjust the amount of food so that people feel at the end of it that they're not overwhelmed, that they've had this comfortable, enjoyable cultural experience.
So less is more in those circumstances.
In those circumstances,
if you're going 5 courses.
Yeah.
I've heard a few comments already to the fact that dining alone is a somewhat pejorative act, in as much as it doesn't really, you can't enjoy the conviviality of a culinary experience, the argument goes, doing it alone. Is there anything sort of anti-nutrition about eating alone?
I feel that when we're eating with people, we eat slower than if we sit down and we just gobble up the food quickly. We eat slower, it's more of a relaxed experience.
And that's better for you?
It's better for you. It's better for your digestion. It's better for your mind. And it's also better for your hormone levels, like your insulin control, because if you're eating slower, you're not having a huge insulin surge.
The grammar nerds are going to want me to say, when you're eating more slowly,
more
as opposed
slowly.
to slower.
Yeah, more slowly.
For the record.
Yeah.
You share that view?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of research that shows that eating with other people kind of regulates your intake. So not just slower, although that's part of it, but
More
also
slowly.
More slowly. They're all saying
it's infectious.
You're a PhD, for goodness sake.
Right. More slowly, and also what you eat. I think you tend to make very different choices when you're eating with different people, or when someone's cooking for you and helping you to kind of guide your meal selection. So I think all of those things, more variety. Obviously, you can share more different dishes or different food groups. So I think social eating is important.
There are actually any studies, though, Josh, that said if you eat with other people, you will eat more slowly and more nutritionally, and therefore it's better for you.
I don't know about those studies, but I have read things that talk about the really negative impact of the social isolation, right?
Yeah.
And so it's not necessarily just talking about how the benefits of the convivial eating, but the really tangible negative impact of social isolation. I read a study recently that said that it was on par with smoking.
Come on,
True
really?
fact. Huh. That the impact on your health and on your body of that isolation from other people
Can be as harmful as smoking.
harmful to your health as smoking.
All right, following up on this health issue, you're at Wellspring. Wellspring's a place that helps people who've got cancer. I want to know what the difference is between planning a meal, as we've been talking about so far, versus planning a meal when you're trying to fight cancer at the same time.
Exactly. I'm a program leader. I'm at Wellspring Cancer Support Network here in Toronto, and I run programs and I develop programs for people who are living with cancer anywhere in their journey. So at the beginning of their journey, mid-journey, and we get together as a group and I teach them how to eat well. And it's a charitable run foundation, so they don't have to pay for this service. And it's fantastic for them because they learn how to take the nutrition scientific information and put it into practical terms.
But is this something as simple as, when you're suffering from cancer, forget the chips and chocolate bars?
There are scientific studies that show that different foods from different food groups, for instance, mushrooms and the green leafy vegetables, the cruciferous vegetables, have cancer-fighting ingredients that may, if you're at risk for cancer or you currently have cancer, may help turn off the genes in terms of cancer spreading, and it actually helps you feel better. And on Joshna's point, in terms of getting everyone communally into a setting where they feel comfortable cooking and learning, at Wellspring, I sit in front of a big island and I show them the food that we should be eating if we have cancer or for cancer prevention. I show them how to cook it, and I talk about things like turmeric, which has the active component curcumin, which is very healthy for us.
Do you know what? I'm jumping in here because we got a few minutes to go. This is a whole show in itself,
Oh,
and I want to
yeah.
have you come back in the fall. Okay? You come back in the fall and we'll do a
Absolutely,
program
yeah.
on this
Oh,
because there's so much more to
cancer
say
prevention.
here. Okay. Dylan, to you then. The idea of everybody sitting down at the end of the day at a table for dinner in a sort of cultural, experiential way, from your vantage point, is that disappearing, that phenomenon?
Well, it's definitely disappearing. I mean, Gallup does polling on this, and I think in the United States in the last 5 years or so, it's gone from something like 35% of families have 7 days a week a meal at home down to like 27% or something like that. So there's this kind of steady decline in that. And I think there's a lot of different reasons for that. But I guess from my perspective, the question isn't so much how do we reinvigorate the meal. That would be nice to do if we could do it, but people have a hard time doing that despite knowing it's important. What can we do to make, say, snacking more social? How can we turn that, how can we learn different ways of eating snacks or grazing? Or how can we have lunch at the office that's more social than just eating something at your desk? And I think
All that's to the good, but what about that family meal at the end of the day? Still a big deal for you?
Well, it's curious because I'm a single person who lives alone, and I have actually thought that I need to be more conscious of making plans with my people to say every Tuesday we get together and we eat and we all come out of our individual, because my habits by myself are really unregulated and I can spend way too much time in front of a screen eating and all of those things. And I've been thinking that I needed to make more connections to say, I've got salad, you've got a bit of meat, someone else has a nice little loaf of bread, let's get together and at least look at each other and have a conversation, pool our resources and share a meal, just to take that dip down once, even if it's just once a week, right?
As crazy as this sounds, Shauna, I have seen studies that say you eat a meal as a family at the end of the day, and it's one of the most significant factors in your children turning out to be good citizens.
A family who dines together stays together.
Interesting,
It's
eh?
true.
Yeah. Jamie, you find that in your life as well?
I think I've always advocated for the family meal being an important part of the day. To reconnect us in this digital world, it's more of an analog representation of a direction that I think people yearn for. They want to have these kinds of connections and more of a connection to the natural world. I have a farm, I've mentioned this before, and I'm running a dinner series there in the summer. And the act of bringing people from urban spaces to a rural space, that initial period of an hour, let's say, where I call it decompression, and starting to assimilate your new environment, people are, it's palpable, the response. And then you segue into a nice dining experience around a table, and it's a really positive thing that people, I sense, yearn for.
And you know what? If you actually have dinner with your family members and you have a no devices rule, you'll actually get to know your kids better, which is not a bad thing. Shauna Lindzon and Jamie Kennedy, good of you to join us tonight here on TVO. Dylan Gordon, Joshna Maharaj on the other side of the table. Yes. Bon appetit, everybody.
Indeed, you too. Thank you.
Cheers.
Thank you.
Help TVO create a better world through the power of learning. Visit TVO.org and make a tax-deductible donation today.